Good evening and a very warm welcome to those of you that are joining our session on annual reviews tonight. Essex County Council, we're delighted to offer these sessions from a variety of professionals across support teams in Essex. We're asking please if you can use the chat function to answer any questions, to ask any questions so that they can be raised during the session by the our facilitator. We also would like to remind you please not to share any specific information in the chat, such as names of people or settings, and we hope you enjoy our session and find it useful. I'm just going to introduce myself. I'm Claire Woodcock and I'm one of the managers. I job share the management of the role for the Send Information Advice and Support Service. And I've got with me here tonight, Sally, I don't know if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Sally Granger from the same service, and I work on the helpline for our service.
And sorry. Sally and I are stepping into the session tonight. Our colleague Hannah Knight, who's our training lead for the SENDIASS service, has prepared this presentation. Unfortunately, she isn't able to be here, but we're very pleased to be delivering this tonight. So I'm going to be talking through some of the slides. I'm not going to be talking verbatim what you'll be seeing on your slides, but you'll be receiving a copy of the slides after the sessions, and they will be available on the local offer as well. So the contents of this presentation, what we're going to be talking to you about are what is an annual review, why we have an annual review, how to prepare for an annual review, and what your rights are after an annual review. In section 44.5 of the 214 Children and Families Act, it states that the main purpose of an annual review is to review the progress made by a child or young person has made towards achieving their outcomes as specified in their EHCP. It's also a statutory process of looking at the needs, provision and outcomes specified within an EHC plan and deciding on whether these need to change. It's also important to note that an annual review is not just a meeting, it's a process. Section 9.168 also highlights that reviews must be taken in partnership with the child or young person and their parents. It must take account of their views, wishes and feelings, and includes the right to request a personal budget. So why do we have an annual review? This has been split into two parts, the local authority's duty and the parent and carer's role within the process. We'll look first at the local authority's duty. The local authority have a duty to review the education, health and care plan as minimum of every 12 months. The reviews must focus on the progress made towards the child or young person's outcomes as specified within section E of the EHC plan. For parents, the annual review is required to check all sections of the EHCP, not just the educational targets and provision. It can provide an opportunity also for parents and young people to request changes and updates. The annual review is also a good time of reflection for the education setting, and it can support them in planning the next steps for the child or young person's journey. Timelines for holding the annual review. When it's approaching the time to review the EHC plan, it may be beneficial to speak with the education setting to confirm the name of who's chairing the meeting so that you can liaise with them, and also so you know what responsibilities that they have. One of their main responsibilities is that they should be writing to all involved with your child or young person. It's important that the right people are invited to the annual review. So we advise spend some time thinking about the team around your child or young person. This could be speech and language therapists, occupational therapists, educational psychologists or mentors. For the school, 2 weeks prior to the annual review, invitations should be sent out, and there's more information on the details of the timelines within the Code of Practice within Chapter 9. Just want to move on. Just trying to tab on. Oh, there we go. The meeting itself. This can be seen as the middle part of the annual review process. It's the time when parents, carers, children and young people and professionals can raise any concerns or make suggestions for changes to the EHCP, provided that there is evidence to support these changes. This evidence can come from reports, letters or one plans. It's important that a record of the meeting is taken. Parents, carers, children and young people can take someone with them to the meeting for support. So what should be discussed at the meeting? We've listed 7 key points. The meeting must focus on the progress made towards achieving the outcomes. The meeting must establish whether the current outcomes remain appropriate. It must review the short-term targets and set new ones. It should review the specialist educational provision and arrangements for delivering it to ensure it's still appropriate. To review any health and social care provision and check its effectiveness. Check if the aspirations have changed, and also check whether the parent or young person would like to request a personal budget. And it's important to highlight the language used within the law. Where the word must is written, it means it has to be followed. If it says should, this is a recommendation of good practice. So what are some top tips for preparing for an annual review? Firstly, prepare your own notes for the review meeting, setting out what you think needs to be changed so that you can be sure that everything you want to discuss is covered. Make sure you spend time looking through your child or young person's EHC prior to the meeting, paying particular attention to section B, which is the description of your child's SEND, section F, which outlines the provision for your child, and consider whether the child or young person's progress towards the outcomes and whether or not the outcomes remain appropriate in section E. In section B of your EHCP, when we are thinking about your child or young person's special educational needs, it's really important to note that for a need to be placed in section B, your child or young person does not need to have a formal diagnosis. This information can be taken from observations that the school or other professionals have observed. And this may be particularly important when thinking about your child's sensory or, for example, social, emotional or mental health needs. Section F of your child or young person's plan looks at the provision that is needed to support your child or young person in working towards achieving their outcomes. And as a rule of thumb, for every need outlined in section B, there should be a provision to meet that in section F. The local authority have a legal duty to specify the support the child or young person receives. This means each provision should outline the who, what, where and when. So in other words, it should clearly state who is going to be delivering this. For example, the teacher or the teaching assistant, and if there are any other children going to be involved. What intervention they're having, where this will take place, for example, inside or outside of the classroom, and how often this will happen. An example of this might be Child X with 2 other pupils and the class teacher will read together for 15 minutes, 3 times a week in the book corner. The word outcome is often used, but what does it actually mean? Section 9.66 of the Code of Practice states that an outcome can be identified as the benefit or difference made to an individual as a result of an intervention. Outcomes should not be a description of a service being delivered, and all outcomes should be what we call SMART, which is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. An example of this might be, by the end of Key Stage 2, child X will be able to work independently for at least 50% of each lesson. And there's more information on this that can be found on the Council for Disabled Children's website, and we'll be including some links to this at the end of the presentation. So what happens after the annual review meeting? There are some timescales that you need to take note of. The chair has 2 weeks from the date of the annual review meeting to write up the information and send it to all that were invited to the meeting. These notes must include a reflection of the conversations held at the annual review, along with any amendments discussed. 4 weeks from the date of the annual review meeting, the local authority have 4 weeks to decide if they're either going to keep the plan, make amendments to it, or to cease the plan. Within 4 weeks of the annual review meeting, the local authority will write to you, informing you of the decision they've made after taking into consideration the annual review paperwork. You have 15 calendar days to respond to this, as set out in Chapter 9 of the Code of Practice. The letter you receive will also outline your rights to appeal, should you not agree with the local authority's decision. It's very important that you take time to read this letter fully and to make note of the date it was sent. This date is the start of the 2-month appeal window. Remember, it's not the date that you receive the letter, but the date written on the letter. The letter will also explain your right of appeal, your requirement to consider mediation, and also your right to receive information and advice and support from a service such as ours, SENDIASS. I think it's also important to mention that should you appeal, the EHCP must be maintained until the hearing takes place. Within 8 weeks of your response to the local authority regarding the decision following the annual review, you should be informed of the proposed changes by way of the local authority issuing an amended EHCP or informing you that they will not be making any amendments along with the reasons why. As discussed in the previous slide, the letter will also explain to you your rights of appeal, your requirement to consider mediation, and your right to receive information and advice and support. Again, it's important to note that you take note of the date that's written on this letter rather than the date that you receive the letter, as the date written on the letter is the start of your 2-week appeal window. Excuse me. Some important dates to remember should your child or young person meet a transition point in their education. Firstly, the 15th of February. All plans should be finalised no later than this date if your child or young person is moving from one phase of education to another. So this could include starting school, moving from the infants to the juniors, or from primary to secondary. The 31st of March for children and young people moving from secondary school into post-16, should amendments need to be made. And if your child is moving from one post-16 setting to another, the plan should be finalised no later than 5 months before the transition takes place. It's also important to note that if your child or young person is in Year 9 or above, the annual review should also incorporate the framework for preparing for adulthood and must include consideration for employment, independent living, and their inclusion into the community and society. On this slide, there's just a link that we will be posting into the chat, which is a a video produced by the Council of Disabled Children, which will supplement or help to complement this presentation on annual reviews. And lastly, again, which we will post into the chat, some useful links regarding the topics that we've discussed today. So thank you very much for listening.